My name is Hannah, and I am 34 years old. I used to think being a good wife meant becoming whoever my husband wanted me to be. For 5 years, I twisted myself into shapes that were never mine, trying to measure up to a woman I had never even met. Then one night, standing in our kitchen, Greg compared me to her again. But this time, I did not cry. I did not argue. I just smiled and said something that made his jaw drop to the floor. Before I take you back to the beginning, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if stories about finding your strength resonate with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Now, let me tell you about the woman I used to be and how I almost lost myself completely. 7 years ago, I was 27 years old and living my best life in Denver, Colorado. I worked as an interior designer at a boutique firm downtown, the kind of place where creativity was celebrated and every project felt like an adventure. I loved walking into empty spaces and imagining what they could become. I loved the smell of fresh paint and the satisfaction of watching a client's face light up when they saw the finished result. Back then, I knew exactly who I was. I had a group of girlfriends I had known since college, and we would meet every Thursday for tacos and margaritas at this little place on Larimer Street. On weekends, I would wake up early and drive to the mountains for a hike. There was this trail near Boulder that I loved, where you could see the whole city spread out below you like a map. I would stand at the top, catching my breath, feeling like I could conquer anything. I met Greg at an art exhibition my company was hosting in a converted warehouse in Reno. We had designed the space for a local artist, transforming the raw brick walls and exposed beams into a gallery that felt both industrial and intimate. I was standing near one of the installations, watching guests mingle with champagne glasses in hand, when I noticed him studying a piece on the far wall. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with dark hair that was just starting to gray at the temples, even though he was only 30. He wore a navy blazer over a simple white shirt, and when he caught me looking, he smiled. Not a cocky smile, but a warm one, like he was genuinely happy to see another person in the room. He walked over and introduced himself. His name was Greg, and he worked as a software engineer for a tech company across town. He asked me about the exhibition, about my role in creating the space, and he listened like my answers actually mattered. He noticed details I had worked hard on, things most people walked right past. The way the lighting shifted in different corners, the subtle color palette that tied everything together. By the end of the night, he had asked my number. I gave it to him without hesitation. Our first dates felt like scenes from a movie I had always wanted to star in. We walked through City Park as the leaves were changing, kicking through piles of gold and crimson while we talked about everything and nothing. He took me to restaurants I had never tried, hidden gems tucked away in neighborhoods I did not know existed. We watched documentaries together on his couch, sharing a blanket and a bowl of popcorn, debating the merits of each film like it was the most important conversation in the world. Greg was thoughtful in ways that caught me off guard. He opened car doors for me, he remembered that I liked my coffee with oat milk and 2 sugars, and he would have a cup waiting when I came over in the morning. Every night, no matter how late it was, he would text me good night with a little message about something he was looking forward to doing with me. I introduced him to my parents about 4 months in. They lived in a suburb south of the city, in the same house where I had grown up. My mom made her famous pot roast, and my dad grilled Greg about his job and his intentions like it was a job interview. But by the end of the night, they were all laughing together, and my mom pulled me aside to whisper that she really liked this one. Greg talked about the future like it was already ours. He wanted a family someday, 2 kids maybe, a house with a yard where they could play. He wanted to build something stable, something lasting. He said he had spent his 20s focused on his career, and now he was ready for the next chapter. I remember lying next to him one night, his arm around me, and thinking that this was it. This was the man I had been waiting for my whole life. We got married 2 years after that first night at the gallery. The wedding was small and perfect, held at a farm about an hour outside the city. I wore a simple white dress that my mother had helped me pick out, and I carried a bouquet of lavender that matched the flowers lining the aisle. My father walked me down a path of soft green grass, and I could see Greg waiting at the end, his eyes shining with something that looked like pure joy. The first months of marriage were everything I had hoped for. We moved into a new apartment together, a two-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood where we could walk to coffee shops and farmers markets. We spent weekends decorating, debating paint colors and furniture arrangements like it was the most fun game in the world. We cooked dinner together almost every night, standing side by side in our tiny kitchen, bumping elbows and stealing kisses between chopping vegetables. Greg would introduce me to his colleagues at work events, his hand on the small of my back, his voice proud when he told them about my latest design project. He would brag about my work to his friends, showing them photos on his phone. He made me feel seen and appreciated and loved. I thought I had found my happily ever after. I thought the hard part was over. But I did not know yet that Greg was about to start a new job, and I did not know that his new job would introduce him to a man named Brandon and a woman named Leah, who would change everything. The shift started so gradually that I almost missed it. Greg got promoted and transferred to a larger tech company in downtown Denver, a place with fancy offices and free snacks and the kind of prestige that made him walk a little taller. I was proud of him. We celebrated with champagne and takeout from our favorite Thai place, toasting to new beginnings. At the welcome party for new employees, Greg met Brandon. Brandon was a senior engineer, a few years older than Greg, with the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance. He was the guy everyone wanted to impress, the one who always had the best stories and the loudest laugh. Greg came home that night talking about Brandon like he had found a new best friend, and somewhere in that conversation, he mentioned Brandon's wife for the first time. Her name was Leah. According to Brandon, she was nothing short of extraordinary, a partner at a prestigious law firm, stunningly beautiful, an amazing cook who made everything from scratch, a tennis player who competed in local tournaments, the kind of woman who seemed to excel at everything she touched. I listened to Greg describe her, and I smiled and nodded. "Sounds like a nice couple," I said. I did not think much of it. Why would I? I had never even met this woman. A few weeks later, I decided to try a new pasta recipe for dinner. It was nothing fancy, just a simple carbonara that I had seen online. I was proud of how it turned out. The sauce creamy and rich, the bacon crispy. I set the table with candles and poured us each a glass of wine. Greg took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. "This is good," he said. Then he paused. "But, Brandon was telling me that Leah makes this incredible homemade pasta from scratch, like she rolls out the dough herself and everything. Maybe you could try that sometime." I felt a small sting in my chest, like a paper cut I had not seen coming, but I pushed it away. He was just making a suggestion, right? Maybe I could learn to make fresh pasta. That could be fun. The next weekend, I spent 4 hours in the kitchen. I bought a pasta roller and watched tutorial videos. I mixed flour and eggs until my arms ached. The result was edible, but far from perfect. The noodles were uneven, some too thick, some too thin. When I served it to Greg, he took a few bites and shrugged. "Not bad," he said, already reaching for his phone. That was the first time, but it was far from the last. The comparisons started coming more frequently after that, slipping into our conversations like uninvited guests. One evening, Greg was scrolling through his phone and looked up at me. "Leah always dresses so elegantly for company events," he said casually. "Maybe you should get some new dresses, something more sophisticated." I looked down at what I was wearing, a comfortable sweater and jeans, my usual after-work outfit. I had always thought I dressed fine. I had a closet full of professional clothes for work and nice outfits for going out. But suddenly, I was not so sure. A few days later, he showed me pictures on his phone. "Brandon sent me these photos of their house," he said, swiping through images of a pristine living room with white furniture and expensive art on the walls. "Leah decorated the whole thing herself. It looks like something out of a magazine." I thought about our apartment, the one we had decorated together with so much joy just a year ago. Now it felt shabby in comparison. Then came the comments about my body. Leah runs 5 miles every morning, Greg mentioned one Saturday as I was eating breakfast. She stays in such great shape. You should think about starting a running routine. I started running the next week. Every morning at 6, before work, I would drag myself out of bed and hit the pavement. My lungs burned and my legs ached, but I kept going. I told myself I was doing it for my health, but deep down, I knew the truth. I was doing it for Greg. I was doing it so he would stop comparing me to a woman I had never met. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. I bought new dresses, expensive ones that I could not really afford. I rearranged our living room 3 times, trying to make it look more like the pictures he had shown me. I ran every morning until I could finish 3 miles without stopping. None of it made a difference. Greg always found something new to compare. One night, after another comment about how Leah had cooked an elaborate dinner for Brandon's work colleagues, I finally worked up the courage to say something. "You mention Leah a lot," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It makes me feel like you're not happy with me." Greg looked at me like I had sprouted a second head. "What are you talking about? I'm just trying to help you improve. Why are you being so sensitive?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words died in my throat. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Other wives probably appreciated when their husbands gave them suggestions. Other wives probably didn't take everything so personally. I went to bed that night feeling confused and small. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with me. Why could I not just be grateful that Greg wanted to help me be better? I decided to try harder. I would become the wife Greg deserved. I would become someone he could be proud of. I would become, if not exactly like Leah, then at least close enough that he would finally stop comparing me. I had no idea that this decision would cost me everything I had ever loved about myself. 2 years passed, 2 years of trying to transform myself into someone I was not. 2 years of chasing an impossible standard that moved further away every time I thought I was getting close. By the time I turned 32, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror. I had given up hiking. Greg had mentioned once that Leah played tennis, and that tennis was more sophisticated than tramping around in the woods. So I sold my hiking boots and signed up for tennis lessons. I hated every minute of it. The courts felt sterile compared to mountain trails. The atmosphere made me anxious instead of energized. But I kept going, week after week, because Greg thought it was a good idea. I changed how I dressed, how I did my makeup, even how I spoke. I bought clothes that didn't feel like me, structured blazers and fitted dresses in neutral colors. I spent an hour every morning on my appearance, following tutorials to achieve the kind of polished look that Greg seemed to admire. I practiced speaking more softly, more carefully, editing out the enthusiasm that used to bubble up naturally. My friendships faded away. Greg suggested I spend less time with my college friends and more time learning useful skills. Leah uses her free time productively. She takes cooking classes, learns new languages. Your friends just sit around drinking margaritas. So I stopped going to Thursday dinners. I stopped returning calls and texts. Eventually, the invitations stopped coming. When I looked in the mirror now, I saw a stranger, a polished, put-together stranger who had lost something essential along the way. My eyes looked tired, even when I was not physically exhausted. My smile felt rehearsed, like I was performing a role instead of living my life. My work suffered too. I used to walk into client meetings with confidence, eager to share my ideas and defend my design choices. Now I second-guessed everything. What if my ideas were not sophisticated enough? What if my taste was too ordinary? I started letting other designers take the lead on projects, hanging back instead of stepping up. My boss noticed. "Hannah, you have been quiet lately," she said one afternoon. "Is everything okay? We used to have to hold you back in presentations. Now it's like you're not even there." I assured her everything was fine. I lied with a smile that had become second nature. The moment I knew things had gone too far came one evening when Greg suggested we have dinner with Brandon and Leah. My stomach dropped the instant he said it. I would finally meet this mythical woman I had been trying to emulate for 2 years. The thought terrified me. I prepared like I was going into battle. I got my hair professionally done. I bought a new dress that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. I researched topics they might discuss, so I would have intelligent things to say. I barely slept the night before. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and waiters who called you by name. Brandon was exactly as I had pictured him, loud and confident and slightly condescending. But Leah surprised me. She was beautiful, I could not deny that, tall and slender with honey blonde hair and perfect posture. She wore a silk blouse and tailored pants, exactly the kind of elegant outfit Greg always praised. When she spoke, her voice was smooth and measured, but something was off. Behind her perfect smile, I saw exhaustion. Deep in her eyes, I recognized a weariness that I knew too well because I saw it every morning in my own reflection. Brandon dominated the conversation, as I had expected, but what I had not expected was the way he talked about Leah. It wasn't loving, it was possessive. He listed her accomplishments like he was reading a resume, not describing his wife. He mentioned her law firm partnership, her tennis ranking, her cooking skills. With each boast, Leah seemed to shrink a little more. She barely spoke all evening. When Brandon said something about her, she would nod and smile, but she never added to the conversation. She never disagreed. She never told her own stories. At one point, our eyes met across the table, just for a moment, but in that moment, I felt something pass between us. Recognition, maybe, or understanding, like we were both looking at each other through glass walls, seeing reflections of our own prisons. On the drive home, Greg could not stop talking about Leah, how graceful she was, how polished, how she never interrupted or said anything embarrassing. I stared out the window at the passing streetlights and said nothing. That night, something inside me started to crack. Not break, not yet, but crack like ice at the edge of a frozen lake, warning of thin places underneath. Over the following months, my health began to fail, not dramatically, but steadily. I developed insomnia, lying awake until 2 or 3 in the morning, my mind racing with everything I should be doing better. I started losing weight, not because I was trying to, but because stress had stolen my appetite. When I did eat, food tasted like cardboard. I found myself crying in odd places, in the shower where Greg couldn't hear, in my car before work, staring at the steering wheel until my tears dried, in the bathroom at the office, pressing paper towels to my eyes and hoping no one would notice the redness. My mother called one Sunday, and I could hear the worry in her voice. "Honey, you sound different. Are you getting enough sleep? You look so thin in the pictures you posted." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, the lie rolling off my tongue with practiced ease. I hung up and sat alone in the apartment, surrounded by furniture I'd chosen to please Greg, wearing clothes I had bought to please Greg, living a life I had built to please Greg. And I realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that I had completely lost myself. Then came the night that destroyed the last shred of dignity I had been clinging to. We were in bed, afterwards, lying in the darkness. I felt empty and disconnected, the way I often felt lately during intimate moments. I'd started to dread them, but I never said anything because wives were supposed to want their husbands. Greg shifted beside me and said in a casual tone that made his words even more devastating, "You know, Brandon told me that Leah is always more enthusiastic. You just seem tired all the time." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I lay there, frozen, as tears slid silently down my face and soaked into my pillow. He had invaded the last private space I had. He had taken his comparisons into our most intimate moments. There was nowhere left to hide. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake until dawn, feeling something die inside me. The part of me that had been fighting to believe this was normal, that had been trying to convince myself I could fix this if I just tried harder. That part finally gave up. I knew I could not go on like this, but I had no idea what to do next. The company party that changed everything happened 3 months later, in October. Greg's company was celebrating its 10th anniversary, and the event was held at a fancy venue downtown with an open bar and a live jazz band. I did not want to go. I had been dreading it for weeks, counting down the days with a sense of doom. But Greg insisted, so I put on another expensive dress and another manufactured smile, and I went. I spent the first hour following Greg around like a shadow, nodding at conversations I could not focus on, shaking hands I immediately forgot. My feet hurt in my heels. My face ached from smiling. All I wanted was to find a quiet corner and disappear. Greg got pulled into a discussion with his boss about some project deadline, and I took the opportunity to escape. I drifted toward the bar, thinking a glass of wine might help me survive the next few hours. That is when I noticed him. He was standing alone near a tall window, looking out at the city lights with an expression I recognized intimately, the look of someone who was present in body but absent in spirit, someone counting the minutes until they could leave. He was tall, with brown hair that fell across his forehead in a way that seemed almost defiant against the formal atmosphere. His suit was nice but not flashy, and he held his drink like he had forgotten it was in his hand. Something made me walk toward him. Maybe it was his solitude. Maybe it was the sadness in his posture. Maybe I was just tired of pretending to be happy and wanted to stand next to someone else who was not pretending either. "Quite a party," I said, gesturing vaguely at the crowd behind us. He turned to look at me, and I saw his eyes were a warm brown, kind but tired. "That is one word for it," he said with a small smile. We introduced ourselves. His name was Mike, and when he told me he was Leah's husband, I almost choked on my wine. Mike, the husband of the perfect Leah. I had heard Greg and Brandon mention him occasionally, always dismissively, always as an afterthought. I had imagined him as some sort of extension of Leah, equally polished and successful. The man standing in front of me was nothing like what I had imagined. "So you are Hannah," he said, and there was something in his voice, a note of recognition that surprised me. "I've heard a lot about you from Brandon and Greg." I laughed, a sound that came out more bitter than I intended. "All good things, I hope." Mike studied my face for a moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing more than I wanted to show. Then he said, quietly, "Actually, I think we might have more in common than you realize." Something in his tone made me catch my breath. "What do you mean?" He glanced around, checking that no one was close enough to hear. "Is there somewhere quieter we could talk?" We found a small terrace off the main event space, empty except for some potted plants and a few scattered chairs. The October air was cool but not cold, and the noise of the party faded to a distant hum. Mike told me about his life, and with every word I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. He was an architect, he explained. He ran a small practice that specialized in sustainable design. He loved his work, loved creating buildings that worked with the environment instead of against it. But according to Leah, that wasn't good enough. "She constantly compares me to Brandon," Mike said, staring at his drink. "He makes twice what I make. He has a corner office and a company car. He got promoted 3 times in 5 years. He paused. "She actually told me once that she wished she had married someone more ambitious." I felt my heart constrict. "That's awful." "Brandon does the same thing," Mike continued. "He brags about Leah constantly at work, but when we are together socially, he compares me to his other friends, their cars, their houses, their salaries. It is like I'm never enough." I thought about all the times Greg had praised Leah. I thought about the way Brandon had talked about her at dinner, like she was a trophy he had won. I thought about the exhaustion I had seen in her eyes. Does Leah compare you to Greg? I asked. Mike nodded slowly. Greg and others. Basically anyone who is more successful than me by whatever metric she is using that day. He looked at me. Does Greg compare you to Leah? I did not answer with words. I didn't have to. The look on my face said everything. We stood there in silence for a moment, two strangers who suddenly understood each other better than the people we had married. How long has this been going on? Mike asked. Almost 3 years, I said, since Greg started working with Brandon. For me, it has been 4 years since Leah made partner and decided I needed to match her success level. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but for the first time in months, they were not tears of shame. They were tears of relief. Someone else understood. Someone else was living the same nightmare. I thought I was crazy, I whispered. I thought I was just too sensitive. You are not crazy, Mike said, firmly, and you are not too sensitive. What they are doing to us, it's a form of abuse. I did not recognize it either, not for a long time, but I've been doing research, reading books. It's real, and it's wrong. That night, standing on that terrace, something shifted inside me. A door opened that I had not even known was there. Mike and I exchanged phone numbers before the party ended, just in case, we told ourselves. Just in case we needed someone to talk to who understood. I did not know then that this exchange would save my life, but looking back, I think some part of me already knew. The months that followed were a slow awakening, like coming out of a fog I had not realized I was lost in. Mike and I started texting, just small things at first, checking in on each other's days. He would send me articles about emotional abuse and ask if anything resonated. I would send him updates about my attempts to set boundaries with Greg. We were careful, always meeting in public places, always keeping our conversations focused on healing rather than anything that could be misconstrued. We met for coffee once a week at a small cafe on the edge of downtown, far from where either of our spouses might run into us. I found myself looking forward to those meetings more than anything else in my week, not because of any romantic feelings, but because Mike was the only person I could be completely honest with. For the first time in years, I didn't have to pretend. I told Mike things I had never told anyone, about the nights I cried myself to sleep, about the way I had given up everything I loved to become someone I was not, about the shame I felt for letting it happen, for not being strong enough to stop it. Mike listened without judgment. He shared his own struggles, his own shame, his own moments of doubt. He told me about the time Leah had laughed at his dream of starting his own firm. He told me about the nights he slept on the couch because she was too disappointed in him to share a bed. We were both broken, but together, we started to piece ourselves back together. I want to be the person I was before, I told him one afternoon, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold. I used to be confident. I used to know who I was. I don't even recognize myself anymore. You can find her again. I believe that. I have to believe it because I need to find myself again too. He encouraged me to reconnect with the things I had given up. So I called one of my old college friends, a woman named Patricia who I had not spoken to in 2 years. I expected her to be angry or cold or distant. Instead, she practically shouted with joy when she heard my voice. "Hannah, oh my God, I've missed you so much. Where have you been?" I cried on the phone with her for 20 minutes. I told her everything, the whole ugly story, and she didn't judge me. She just listened, and then she said the words I needed to hear. "That's not a marriage, honey. That's a prison, and you deserve so much better." I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Rosenberg, who specialized in relationships and emotional abuse. I went to her office every Tuesday afternoon, telling Greg I was taking a painting class. She helped me understand what had happened to me, gave me words for experiences I had never been able to name. Gaslighting, love bombing, moving the goalposts, emotional manipulation. I was not crazy. I was not too sensitive. I had been systematically broken down by someone who was supposed to love me. The realization was devastating and liberating at the same time. I started making small changes. I opened a savings account that Greg didn't know about and started putting a little money into it each month. I reconnected with another old friend, a woman named Joanna who lived in Boulder. I even went on a hike one Saturday, my first in almost 3 years, while Greg thought I was at a work event. Standing on that trail again, breathing in the mountain air, I felt something I had almost forgotten: peace, joy, a sense of being exactly where I belonged. I started to remember who Hannah was. Not Greg's wife, not a failed imitation of Leah, just Hannah, a woman who loved design and hiking and laughing with friends, a woman who had dreams and opinions and value. Mike was going through his own transformation. He started standing up to Leah in small ways, refusing to apologize for his career choices, declining to attend events where he knew he would be belittled. He told me about the arguments, the cold silences that followed, but he also told me about the sense of dignity he was reclaiming, one boundary at a time. We never crossed any lines during those months. We never held hands or spoke of romantic feelings, but I would be lying if I said there was not something growing between us, a connection deeper than friendship, a bond forged in shared suffering and mutual understanding. I knew somewhere in my heart that I was falling for Mike, and I suspected he was falling for me too, but neither of us said it out loud. Not yet. We both knew that before we could move toward something new, we had to finish ending what was already broken. 6 months after that first conversation on the terrace, I reached my breaking point. I had changed so much in those months, even if the changes were invisible to Greg. I was stronger, clearer, more certain of my own worth. I had a therapist, a support network, a secret savings account, and a plan. I was no longer the broken woman who cried in the bathroom. I was a woman preparing for battle. But Greg had not changed at all. If anything, his comparisons had gotten worse. It was like he could sense something shifting in me and was trying to reassert control. Leah just made partner at her firm's new office, he announced one evening, scrolling through his phone. She is opening a whole new department. What have you accomplished lately? Leah is training for a marathon, he mentioned another day. Meanwhile, you can barely run to the mailbox. I let the comments roll off me now, but I cataloged each one. I was building a case, collecting evidence, preparing for the conversation I knew was coming. The night it all came to a head was a Friday in April. I had come home exhausted, but strangely calm. I knew, without being able to explain how, that tonight was the night. Something in the air felt different, electric with possibility. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Greg walked in, already talking about his day. He had been to lunch with Brandon, he said. Leah had sent along an elaborate homemade meal in a thermal bag, 3 courses, all from scratch. You know, he said, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed, you could really learn a thing or two from her. It would not kill you to put in a little more effort. I set down the knife I had been using to chop vegetables. I turned to face him slowly. Something in my expression must have been different because Greg's casual smirk faltered slightly. What? He said. I smiled. Not the tight, apologetic smile I had worn for years. A real smile. A peaceful smile. You are right, I said. Greg blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. I am? Absolutely. Leah is amazing. Everything you have been telling me for 3 years is true. She's accomplished and elegant and talented. I paused, letting the moment stretch. Her husband, Mike, is pretty great too. The confusion on Greg's face was almost comical. What? How do you know Mike? We've been friends for about 6 months now, I said, keeping my voice calm. Turns out we have a lot in common. See, our spouses would not stop talking about how perfect the other one is. All that bragging, it brought us together. Greg's jaw dropped, literally dropped. I'd never seen that expression outside of cartoons. What are you talking about? What do you mean, friends? What have you been doing? I told him. I told him about the party where we met, about the conversations that followed,
About my therapy sessions. I told him about the articles I had read, the patterns I had recognized, the word for what he had been doing to me for years.
This is emotional abuse, Greg, I said. Constant comparison, making me feel like I am never good enough, gaslighting me when I tried to express my feelings. I did not see it for a long time, but I see it now. Greg's shock was transforming into anger. So you have been sneaking around behind my back, having some kind of affair? I have been surviving, I corrected him. I have been trying to remember who I am after you spent years tearing me down. Mike and I helped each other see the truth. That is all. The truth? Greg's voice was rising. The truth is that you have been meeting another man in secret for months. The truth is that you have been comparing me to another woman for 3 years, I shot back, my own voice steady. Every day, Greg, every single day, you found some way to tell me I was not good enough. Did you ever once think about how that made me feel? Did you ever care? He had no answer for that, because there was no answer. We both knew the truth. I walked to the hall closet and pulled out the suitcase I had packed that morning, hidden behind winter coats he never touched. Greg watched me, his face cycling through emotions, anger, confusion, fear. I talked to a lawyer, I said, zipping the suitcase closed. I am filing for divorce on Monday. You will hear from my attorney about the details. Hannah, wait! His voice had changed now, softened into something almost pleading. We can work this out. I can change. I did not realize I was hurting you. Just give me another chance. I stopped at the door and turned to look at him one last time. The man I had married, the man I had loved, the man who had slowly, methodically dismantled my sense of self. It is too late, I said. You had 5 years to change. You had 5 years to see me, really see me. Instead, you chose to tear me down. I am done trying to be good enough for someone who never wanted me to succeed. I walked out the door without looking back. Mike was waiting in the lobby of a hotel across town. He had left Leah that same night, his own suitcase in hand. We stood there looking at each other, 2 refugees from the same storm, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. We got separate rooms. We were not starting a romance that night. We were ending something else first. But as I lay alone in my hotel bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Hope. The months that followed were not easy. I would be lying if I said they were. Divorce is never simple, even when you know it's the right thing. Greg hired an aggressive lawyer and tried to paint me as the villain. He told our mutual friends that I had cheated on him, that I had abandoned our marriage for another man. Some of them believed him, some of them chose sides. But I had evidence on my side. Years of text messages where Greg compared me to Leah, emails to his friends complaining about my failures, even a few voicemails where he berated me for not measuring up. My lawyer used all of it to establish a pattern of emotional abuse, and in the end, the settlement was fair. I lost some people in the process. A few friends I had thought were mine turned out to be more loyal to Greg. My cousin, who had always adored him, stopped speaking to me entirely. That hurt. It still hurts sometimes, late at night when I think about it. But I gained more than I lost. My old college friends rallied around me like a protective army. Patricia and Joanna organized a girls' night the week after I moved out, and I laughed more that evening than I had in 3 years. My mother drove up from the suburbs with casseroles and hugs and the words every daughter needs to hear. I am so proud of you for being brave. Mike was going through his own battle. Leah was cold and efficient in their divorce, treating the whole thing like a business transaction. She got the house, he got his freedom. According to Mike, she barely seemed affected, but he caught a glimpse of her a few months later at a coffee shop, sitting alone with a distant look in her eyes, and he wondered if she was as invulnerable as she seemed. I found a small apartment near downtown, a 1-bedroom with big windows and a tiny balcony.
I decorated it exactly the way I wanted, with colors Greg would have hated and art that made me happy. For the first time in years, I chose everything based on what I loved, not what someone else might think. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Mike and I went on our first official date. We kept it simple: dinner at a quiet restaurant, followed by a walk through the park where I used to go on first dates back when I still remembered who I was. We talked about everything and nothing. We laughed at terrible jokes. We held hands as the sun went down.
At the end of the night, he walked me to my door and looked at me with those warm brown eyes. "I never compare you to anyone," he said. "You know that, right? You are you, and that is more than enough. That is everything." I kissed him then, standing on my doorstep in the fading light, and I felt something inside me finally heal. We took things slow. We had both been burned, and we were not about to rush into anything. We went on dates, we talked for hours, we learned each other's quirks and flaws and favorite songs. We argued sometimes, about little things, but we always resolved it with respect. We never called each other names. We never compared each other to past loves. I started hiking again. Mike came with me, though he complained about the altitude and the early mornings. We found trails together that neither of us had explored before. We reached summits where we could see the whole world spread out below us, and we celebrated with sandwiches and bad coffee from a thermos. I reconnected with my career, too. The confidence I had lost came flooding back. I started speaking up in meetings again, defending my design choices, pitching new ideas. My boss noticed the change. Within a year, I was promoted to lead designer, running my own team, doing the work I had always loved. And then, one evening, I told Mike about my dream, the dream I had abandoned years ago when Greg started making me feel like nothing I did was special. "I want to open my own studio someday," I said. "My own interior design firm, small, personal, focused on making spaces that actually feel like home." Mike did not laugh. He did not say it was impractical or unrealistic or something I should wait to pursue. He just smiled and said, "I think you would be amazing at that. Let me help you make a business plan." That night, I cried again, but these were different tears. Happy tears, grateful tears, tears of a woman who had finally found her way back to herself. 1 year after the divorce, Mike and I moved in together. We found a small house on the outskirts of Denver with a yard that got good morning light and a spare room we turned into a shared office. He worked on his architectural designs at one desk, while I worked on my studio plans at the other. Sometimes we would spin our chairs around just to look at each other, to remind ourselves that this was real. My studio opened the following spring. I called it Haven Interior Design. Mike designed the logo himself, a little house with a heart in the window. I cried when he showed me. The first year was hard. Building a business from scratch always is, but I had help. I had Mike, I had Patricia and Joanna. I had my mother, who told everyone she knew about her daughter's new company. Slowly, the clients started coming. Word got around, people liked my work. Now, 2 years after that night in the kitchen when everything changed, I am living a life I never thought I would have. I am 36 years old now. I wake up every morning in a house I love, next to a man who loves me exactly as I am. We have a vegetable garden in the backyard that Mike tends with obsessive care. We have a dog named Scout who thinks she's a lapdog even though she weighs 60 pounds. We have a life that is imperfect and beautiful and entirely ours. The healing did not happen overnight. I want to be clear about that. For months after I left Greg, I would wake up at 3 in the morning, heart racing, convinced I had made a terrible mistake. I would look in the mirror and still hear his voice, listing all the ways I fell short of some impossible standard. The therapy helped. The time helped. But mostly, what helped was learning to talk to myself the way I would talk to someone I loved. You are enough. You have always been enough. I said it to myself every morning for a year. At first, I did not believe it, but eventually the words sank in. They became part of me. Mike and I got married last fall. A tiny ceremony, just close friends and family, in a garden that one of my clients let us use. I wore a simple dress, not because it was sophisticated, but because it felt like me. Patricia was my maid of honor. She cried through the whole thing. I sometimes wonder about Greg. I heard through the grapevine that he is dating someone new, a woman named Victoria who works in marketing. A friend of a friend told me she has already started dressing differently since they got together, wearing clothes that seem more his style than hers. I hope she figures it out faster than I did. I hope she has the strength to walk away. And Leah? I have no idea what happened to Leah. She remarried about a year after the divorce to some executive Brandon introduced her to. I do not know if she is happy. I do not know if she ever will be. But I think about her sometimes, about the exhaustion I saw behind her perfect smile, and I feel something like compassion. She was as much a victim of Brandon's impossible standards as I was of Greg's. She just never found her way out. The lesson I learned from all of this is simple, but it took me years to understand it. You cannot become someone else to make another person happy. Not really. You can try. You can give up your hobbies and your friends and your sense of self. You can twist yourself into shapes that were never meant to be yours. But in the end, all you will have is emptiness, a hollow version of a person you do not recognize. The people who truly love you will never ask you to disappear. They will never compare you to someone else. They will see you, the real you, and they will be grateful for exactly who you are. I know this now. I live it every day. Mike never compares me to anyone. When I burn dinner, he laughs and orders pizza. When I wake up with messy hair and no makeup, he tells me I am beautiful. When I succeed at work, he celebrates like it is his own victory. When I fail, he helps me figure out what went wrong without ever making me feel small. That is what love is supposed to look like. I wish I had known that earlier, but I know it now, and that's what matters. If you are watching this and something in my story sounds familiar, I want you to know that you are not crazy. You are not too sensitive. You are not asking for too much by wanting a partner who sees your worth. And if you're living in someone else's shadow, trying to measure up to standards that keep moving further away, please know this. You deserve to stand in your own light. You deserve to be loved for exactly who you are, not who someone else wishes you could be. Sometimes the person who helps you find that light comes from the most unexpected place. For me, it was a stranger at a party who understood my pain because he was living it too. For you, it might be a friend, a therapist, a book, or even a story you hear on the internet. Keep looking, keep hoping. The right people are out there. I built a new life from the ashes of the old one. It was hard and messy and scary, and there were days I wanted to give up, but I did not. And now I wake up every morning grateful that I had the courage to walk away from a man who could not see my worth. I hope my story gives you courage too. Whatever shadow you are living in, I hope you find your way to the light. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a relationship where you felt like you were never enough? How did you find your way back to yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Let us support each other the way Mike and I learned to support one another. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like so others can find it too. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories about strength, healing, and finding your way home. And share this video with anyone who might need to hear it today. You never know whose life you might change. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are, whatever shadows you might be facing, I wish you peace. I wish you courage. And most of all, I wish you the ability to see your own light, even when others try to dim it. You are enough. You have always been enough. Take care of yourself.
This story is a powerful reminder that love should be a mirror, not a mold. For 5 years, Hannah lost herself trying to become a perfect version of someone else, only to realize that the standard she was chasing was a prison for the other woman too. The most profound lesson here is that emotional manipulation often wears the mask of improvement. When a partner constantly compares you to others, they aren't trying to help you grow, they are trying to diminish your worth to maintain control. True growth comes from self-acceptance and the freedom to pursue what makes your soul come alive, whether that's hiking in the mountains or designing a room. Hannah's journey shows that finding your voice often requires the courage to stop apologizing for who you are. Your value is inherent and non-negotiable. Anyone who makes you feel like not enough is simply not the right person to share your life with.